Chapter 7. A Father's Confession. Parting Words. Do not brood over your past mistakes and failures, as this will only fill your mind with grief, regret, and depression. Do not repeat them in the future. Sri Swami Sivananda, physician and philosopher, 1887 to 1963. Following the lead of his elder brothers and other townmates, the young Tony Pizarro submitted an application to the United States Naval Recruiting Station at Sangley Point, Cavite City in the province of Cavite. It was mid-January of 1959. After a few weeks, he received a calling card through the mail at his cousin Remedios Reyes' apartment in Caloocan and was told to report on February 10, 1959, a Monday. Tony, upon receiving notice, went to the Quiapo Catholic Church next to the Far Eastern University where he was enrolled and prayed to God that if he would be accepted and pass all the requirements, he would help his family, his country, and above all, serve God. Each day that passed before the United States Navy exam date, Tony attended a Catholic Mass and silently prayed for his fervent dreams of not only being able to help his family, but also help the poorest of the poor, and, if possible, build an income-generating commercial building in his hometown. Those dreams many years later became a reality. He has built a 4-story building with commercial units on the first floor, apartments on the second floor, hotel rooms on the third floor, and a restaurant on the 4th floor overlooking the Orion River. The building complex is named Jerry and Wendy Building after his children. It is located in the heart of Orion, Bataan. In 2008, he funded, along with friends, a 42-unit free housing project for the poorest of the poor in his hometown. It was under the auspices of Gawad Kalinga, Giving Care, a project headed by Tony Melodo, its president and founder. On February 10, 1959, there were about 200 applicants waiting outside the main gate of the U.S. Naval Base, Sangley Point, Cavite City. The gate was opened at 8 a.m. and a U.S. Marine Sergeant Guard told the applicants to line up like a battalion company and march towards a Quonset hut recruiting office building about a quarter miles away. After a simple briefing by the officer in charge, the applicants were told they had 3 hours to complete the test. The rigorous written exams consisted of basic simple math, English comprehension, and logic. The man in charge was a Caucasian American named Lieutenant Junior Grade G.F. Todd, who appeared to be a very strict disciplinarian. That was the first time Tony met a white American. He felt very scared as he never spoke or heard English regularly. He could hardly understand the language. Todd told the applicants only the best would be admitted. That out of the 200 only 10 would pass. After the exams were corrected, those whose names were called were told to assemble outside the building with the Marine Guard and to march back to the main gate. They were the ones who did not pass the test. About 50, including Tony, were left. That same day, the 50 left behind underwent comprehensive personal interview examinations. They were tested on their ability to communicate in English. Each one was called into a room and was told to answer a direct question. Their answers would determine whether they would pass or fail. It was a simple question, but since it was the first time Tony was questioned by a Caucasian American, he felt very nervous. He was so afraid of facing and talking to a white American. He thought that all white Americans were supreme beings. He almost failed due to the interviewer's misunderstanding of his response. The question was, "What's inside your left-hand breast pocket?" Tony's response, "A handkerchief, sir." The interviewer thought he was guessing. He was told to leave the room because his answer was deemed to be wrong. One incorrect response would doom Tony's life forever. But Tony was not born to give up that easily. The stakes for him were so high he would not let a simple misinterpretation of his response ruin his future. He wanted to show his willingness to do anything to pass and his aggressiveness to get in the Navy. "Sir, my answer is correct," he told the interviewer. To prove that he was correct, Tony pulled out a handkerchief from his breast pocket. The interviewer realized Tony was indeed right. He was amazed by his confidence to quickly respond to the question. He could indeed comprehend the English language correctly. With great relief, Tony was given another card, ordering him to report back the following Monday, March 3, 1959, for his physical examination. "Thanks be to God," he exclaimed to himself. "That was the luckiest day of my life. Only 10 were supposed to be allowed in. I was the 11th sup/sup as they made an exception to their rule. Tony was the happiest person on earth. In the morning of March 3, 1959, all of them that had passed lined up at the main gate of the U.S. Naval Station, Sangley Point, Cavite City, Cavite, and marched with a Marine Guard escort towards the Navy dispensary where the physical exams were to be held. Tony was given a complete physical examination that would include chest x-rays, dental, physical body conditions, weight and blood pressure exams. But Tony only weighed 100 pounds and was worried he might not meet the required weight limit. His grandmother named Camilla, who lived with his auntie Liwanag, advised and reminded him to eat a dozen saba bananas before showing up for the physical exams. She also told him not to discharge his bowels until after his physical exams were over. Tony asked why. "They will add to your weight," he was told. It was late in the afternoon when the recruiting officer announced that the 11 men who were present had passed the physical exams. They were told to come back on March 19, 1959, the following Monday, for the oath-taking and loyalty certificate signing, thus, completing in this final act, their formal acceptance in the U.S. Navy. Tony heard the good news he had been aspiring for. They were told to go home and say goodbye to their families as they were now official recruits and members of the United States Navy. Tony was given an important document for his father to sign signifying the latter's consent for his son to join the U.S. Navy. Tony then went to Manila and dropped all of his classes at the Far Eastern University, packed all his small belongings and said goodbye to his family and friends. He then visited his father and other family members immediately to tell them the good news. He was proud of his feat as others, like his older brother Seferino and older cousin Mike, had been trying to pass the same tests for many years to no avail. However, Tony's father refused to give his consent. He wanted his son to finish his medical studies and become a doctor of medicine. After an in-depth discussion with his father, Tony was so devastated he sought the help of his Auntie Isabel, the younger sister of his father, to convince him to sign the papers. Tony's father still insisted that Tony continue with his impossible dream. After many hours of convincing, his father agreed to let him go. It would be good for him, his Auntie Isabel told his father. "Your son could not be dissuaded, as we all know. He has a strong character, big ambition, is more self-driven, and has the character to succeed compared to others. And, let's face it, it would be difficult for you financially to send him to an expensive medical school." Reluctantly, his father swallowed his pride and accepted the fact his youngest son, on whom he pinned his hope of having a medical doctor among his children, would never become one. Tony shared the good news with his cousin, Gregorio Pizarro, a U.S. Navy sailor himself who happened to be on vacation in the Philippines and was visiting his Auntie Isabel at that time. Kuya Oreo, as I called him, was my favorite cousin during my growing up years. Each time he visited my Auntie Isabel during his vacation, he never failed to meet with me along with his pretty wife, Aunt Normita. I remember vividly his words of wisdom when he told me to become a member of the organization, Brother Mason, which I obeyed years later. In accordance with the Filipino practice of gift-giving, his cousin Gregorio Pizarro pulled out his wallet and handed Tony a $5 bill. "This is my gift to you, and we welcome you in your chosen career. May God be with you always and good luck," he told Tony. That kind gesture was never forgotten by Tony the rest of his life. The day before he left on March 17, 1959, Tony visited his father to say goodbye. The old man pulled him aside and told his son to sit down as he had something important to say. It took a while for him to compose himself, for he was about to say something he was not proud of that happened many years before. He started with an incident during the Second World War when the Japanese Imperial Army occupied the Philippines. Tony had heard about the horrific war stories when the Japanese army went to Orion in search of men who helped the Americans and the Filipino guerrilla resistance movement. Men caught were gathered in the town plaza while a hooded Japanese collaborator pointed at those he said were aiding the Americans and the guerrillas. It was known earlier in the day that the Japanese would arrive unannounced and search for the men. They forcefully entered the home of a suspect and looked in every room of the house. Tony's father confessed it was during that moment when he hid himself inside a closet with his youngest son Tony in his arms. Tears flowed down from his father's eyes when he told Tony that had the young boy make a noise that might result in their discovery by the Japanese, his father was ready to save his own life and let his son die of suffocation. It was a heartbeat confession to remember for Tony. Rather than be captured, be executed, or beheaded with the dreaded Japanese samurai sword, his fathers thought of his 5 other children to leave behind, as they would suffer tremendously if he was gone. Hence, he chose his youngest son Tony to be the sacrificial lamb. Somehow, my father had been carrying that guilt ever since, Tony remembers. He was so thankful to God I kept quiet and did not make a noise. A miracle just happened. Tony just sat there in silence as his father teared up while trying to make peace with son.